Hey guys, I just want to welcome you and thank you for tuning in to listen to this important conversation that we had with Janice McAfee, the wife of the late John McAfee. John was an absolute legend. This conversation is really, really, really awesome. Janice goes into some deep, deep stuff. I think you're really going to enjoy it. And we also have some other big news to announce. If you want to head over to wewananswers.us, we have some really big projects that we've been working on. And I think you're really going to enjoy what you see there. So enjoy the show, guys, and we'll see you soon. Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. Special thanks to Janice here. Janice, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Awesome. You're coming in clear on my end also. Um, Jake's going to join us in a little bit as a speaker also. So, in one more minute, we'll get this thing rolling. Just sit tight for 1 minute, guys.
Hey, what's going on, y'all? I just wanted to say thank you, Dave and Janice. Very nice to meet you, Janice. I'm Jake. Thank you, Dave, for hosting, and I look forward to the space. Hi, Hillary. I see you down there.
All right. Well, thank you guys for coming. Janice, again, thank you for coming. I know the space means a lot to a lot of people because John was such an influential guy. So many people looked up to him, and a lot of people miss him. And there's so many questions about what happened, what's going on. So hopefully you can help put some closure on all this with us. I just want to thank
Uh,
you for coming tonight. But how are you doing tonight?
well, first, thank you for having me. And, John was very important to me as well. Obviously, um, we'll never be the same after our relationship. But I am doing a lot better than I had been, a year ago, and even 2 years ago. But I'm well. I'm well now. Thank you.
So where are you these days?
I'm still in Spain.
So you're still in
I'm still in
Spain.
Spain. I came to Spain with John. We left America together in January of 2019, and we traveled kind of across the Caribbean, and we settled in Spain um, in the summer of 2019, and I've been here ever since.
So you consider that home now?
No, 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 no. I just remained here because I wanted to. Because of the legal things that were happening, and also it just didn't seem right to leave here without John's remains.
Sure.
So that's why I've been here still. But California is my home. That's where my children are,
Okay.
and I look forward to being reunited with them.
Well, I hope that happens very soon. Um, So yeah, we'll get into that a little bit later. Some of the newer updates about what's going on with him. I guess we could start from the beginning. How did you meet John? How did this all start?
So we met in December of 2012. We met the day after John was deported from Guatemala. Um, I was living in Miami. So I'm sorry, that's where we met, South Beach, Miami. And I was living there because I was working as a prostitute there. I was being pimped out. I had a very brutal pimp. And just before I met John, I think maybe in November-ish, I had just sort of come off of leave, if you will, because he had hit me in my face and caused my tooth to go through my lip, and I had to get stitches. So I was out of commission for like a month and a half. And so this is what I was coming off of, this sort of uh, vacation, if you want to call it that, when I met John. And so, just something that's a little important to me to the story is that my grandfather was a pastor of a very small church in San Francisco. And so he had died, years ago, years prior. And for me, I was just feeling like if heaven was real, God was real, my grandfather would be there, so it's just kind of in my mind, sort of speaking to my grandfather, kind of, you know, asking for help, because I didn't want to be in this situation anymore. This was on my birthday, December 9th. So kind of in my mind, it was like, if your God is real, then I need him to show up here for me, because I can't do this another day, week, month, or year. I need out of this. And then on December 14th, I met John. And so for me, it's very, uh, it was just an answer to prayer, if you will. I know it's probably laughable to a lot of people that John McAfee would be an answer to anyone's prayer, but he was an answer to my prayer.
That's really nice. That's really, really nice. Now you guys look like you had the most fun in the world during that COVID time on Twitter. That was wild. You guys, the videos and everything you guys posted. So it was very genuine. You could tell.
Yeah, it was a wild ride, to say the least. So yeah, that's how we met. And
So you met him in Miami doing that. So
yes.
you weren't working then when you did meet him. Did you know?
Actually, I was out that night. I was out with a girlfriend. We've shared this story many times, but I'll share it with you guys as well. So I actually wasn't supposed to be out the night that I met John. I was sleeping. And I had no idea that John was even in town. Apparently, it was all over the news, but I didn't watch the news. I watched reality TV at the time, and I played video games. God of War was my video game. And um, so we get woken up by the pimp, and he asks us to go out, or demands us to go out. And so we go out, and we're on South Beach. And I happened to park my car across from where John was staying, which was the Beacon Hotel right on South Beach. And we were walking, me and my girlfriend, we were walking to our car, and I saw John, who was standing in front of Johnny Rockets, speaking to one of the workers. And we caught eyes, and I nodded, he smiled, but I kept walking. And I turned around, and I caught him looking at my butt as I was walking away. But I decided to keep walking, because it just, he didn't seem interested, and also he didn't look like he had any money. How wrong I was. And so when I got to his hotel, the night security came outside, who was someone I had spoken to before, because that's how you kind of know what's happening in town, by speaking to these, night security or people that work at the hotels. They'll tell you who's in town, what parties are in town, if the cops are out harassing girls or anything like that. So, I was asking him, these same questions, if there's anyone in town and all of this. And he looks down the street, and he sees John standing there. And he was like, "Well, you know who that is?" And I was like, "No, I have no idea." He was like, "Well, that's John McAfee." So I was like, "Well, who's that?" And he said, "Well, the McAfee antivirus." And he said, "Well, that's the creator of it." And so I was like, "Oh, really?" So I decided to turn around and go back. And by this time, he had moved on to a coffee shop, the News Cafe, which is also right on Ocean Drive. And I caught up to him, and he was smoking a cigarette, talking to the workers out front. And I asked him for a cigarette. And he, as he was lighting a cigarette for me, he asked me, or asked us, what were we doing, drugging and rolling old men? To which I responded, "We don't use drugs." And so, because of my response, that intrigued him, and he invited us to sit for coffee, and the rest is history.
Wow, that's awesome. I could see him talking to the employees too. Like, he's just such a man of the people. I think that's why he's so revered by everybody.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So, okay, so then what happens next?
So we sit and we talk for hours. So initially, I kind of went through my spiel. Are you looking to have a good time? You can do 2 for 1 if you want chocolate, if you want vanilla, blah blah blah. And he obviously turned me down, and he said he's not interested. He just wants a cup of coffee. And so then we moved on quickly from that, and I asked him, "Well, what brings you to Miami? Are you in town for business or pleasure?" And so he says, "Yeah, no, not at all. Like, you don't know who I am?" And I was like, "No." Obviously I knew his name, at that time, but I didn't know his story. And so he's like, well, seriously, I've been on the news, like top of the news for the past 3 months. And I was like, I'm sorry, I don't watch the news. And he seemed a bit of almost a little offended that I didn't know who he was from the news or whatever. Um, but so yeah, he proceeded to tell me his story from his side, his side of the story. And so we sat and talked for hours, just him sharing his story, me asking him questions, him answering questions. So it was it was a good conversation. And then I guess, okay, so after that, he asked me to get rid of the white girl because she was high on Molly and she really wasn't adding much to the conversation. So I got rid of her, and and he invited me back to his room. And so we get to his room, and he's standing next to the bed, and he asks, um, "Can we just cuddle, or can we cuddle?" And so I'm like, yeah, we could cuddle. But in my mind, I'm thinking he's talking about something super sexually kinky because I've never, like, no one's ever asked me to cuddle.
There's some kind of code word or some shit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, exactly. Just so ridiculous looking back on it.
Yeah.
But I was like, yeah, because I was thinking, well, I don't know what it is, but I'm sure I could manage, right? But
Oh.
he just literally wanted to cuddle. So he came, got in bed, put his head on my shoulder, and maybe like 2 minutes later, he was out sleeping, snoring, and it was nice. It was just a beautiful night, and that's how our lives proceeded from there. Every day after that, we were together.
Did you
And
Google him that night? Like, who is this guy? And
no, because my pimp had already done that, so he was sharing with me who he was. Because the girlfriend I was with, well, she was another working girl who was working for my pimp. So she obviously went back when I sent her away. She went back and told him who I was with, and so by morning, well, it was 2 in the morning when we met. So um, by sunup, I should say, everyone in the pimp community, I guess, would have known that I was with John McAfee. And so, yeah, my pimp was sharing with me who he was and how he was accused of murder and all of these things. And so, but I didn't want to Google him because I wanted to get to know him from him, you know?
yeah, yeah, of course. Super interesting. So, how do you end up staying with him long term then? Like, how does that happen? Does he ask you to be his girlfriend or?
Yeah, he does actually. So that happened down the road a bit. So we ended up going on a road trip because he bought his pickup truck that had been featured in some of the interviews. And so, if anybody knows what I'm talking about, it's this his Dodge truck where he had put a ram on the front of it, and he had lights fitted on it to just to help kind of be more like a security vehicle. Anyways, um, so he bought this vehicle in Tennessee, and I went and met him in Tennessee, and we went on a road trip from Tennessee to Portland, which was really awesome because we got to know each other a lot better. I'm one that always enjoys road trips, and the fact that we didn't end up killing each other on the road trip, because I've heard people say that that's the test to um, a relationship lasting, go on a road trip with your partner. And so, but it was really good. We listened to books on CD, which I'd never done before. And it was really, really awesome. We talked and we listened to music, and it was just a really good time. And um, so after that time, which would have taken us, let's see, through Christmas and New Year's. So we didn't get to Portland until after New Year's. And yes, he asked me to be his girlfriend. I had to go back to Miami because I had a court case that I needed to go to. And, John asked me at that time, if you want to come back, that's cool, but there are some things that I'm going to need you to understand I'm not going to allow. And so basically, without him telling me I know about your pimp and all of that, because obviously he would have known he's John McAfee. So, and at the time of the road trip, my pimp was calling me all the time, texting me all the time. wanting to know every step that we were taking and all of those things. But
Was the pimp expecting like big money from because of
yes, he
this?
was. Yes, he was
Yeah.
expecting really big money, which is why he was calling all the time. But at the same time, how do you explain to someone, hey, you're being stupid here because I'm literally in a vehicle with him, sitting right next to him. So there's no way I can answer your phone calls or answer your texts and be all on my phone without him noticing, like, who are you talking to, right? Like I need to be present with him, so yeah, he was expecting this really ridiculous payday. He's like, "Oh, what do you think he'll give you like $100,000?" Like, why would he do that? Like, we're like,
Yeah.
like that's stupid.
Well, I can only imagine a pimp. I mean, he's like, "Oh my God, I got John McAfee as a client."
Yeah.
Like, just the stupidness in his head was probably just going off the chain.
It was astronomical, the ignorance, because he just, saw dollar signs, but that's where his mind was. He was trying to figure out a way to, blackmail him for money, to
Oh, I bet.
all of these crazy things, and that wasn't what I wanted, as I explained to you, for me, John was an answer to prayer. And so for me, I looked at him as what he ended up being, which was a way for me to get out of that life, And so he tells me, I'm not going to allow you to send money to take care of a grown man, So if you come back here to be with me, I just want you to understand that's I'm not going to allow that. So that was our conversation about the pimp. We never had an actual conversation, about him, but that was all that I needed to understand what he was saying. And so I went back to Miami, went to my court case, and came back to Portland, and we just were living together, and it was interesting, because I wasn't looking for a relationship. I wasn't um, I wasn't coming to be with him for that. So it worked out well for me because he had what I like to call flavors of the week. So he had other women that he would go and see, or um, which was fine with me. Like I didn't, I wasn't looking to be like his one and only. That wasn't at all on my mind. I was just looking for a safe space so that I could gather myself and figure out a way how I can use this opportunity to move forward. That's where my mind was at. I also was able to reconnect with my family, reconnect with my children. So it was a really, really good time, for all of those things. And it just, our relationship just from there sort of blossomed into what it eventually became, but there's a lot of um, lack of trust, obviously, because the pimp was still around, because the cartel eventually got involved, um, through the pimp. And so the pimp had been paid a large amount of money. I think, I don't know, something like 50K. I'm not sure. And he had gave them assurances, or this representative from the cartel, he gave them assurances that I would be their middleman and provide them, means and opportunity to do whatever it was they were trying to do. I wasn't sure exactly what they wanted initially. My pimp was saying, or this representative who came through the pimp was saying that they just wanted me to collect information, like who he's with, what sort of security he has, when he's traveling, and all of these things. And that quickly escalated into, okay, we want you to make us a spare key for your apartment, or park the car in this area, or um, I was even given a grainy substance to put in his food, which I didn't do. But all of these things they were asking of me under threat of my life and my children's lives, if I didn't cooperate. And so,
Now, is this before you guys took off and were on the run for that period of time?
so this all began maybe like May of 2013. So very early on into our
So they
relationship.
wanted you to poison him like that early on.
Yes.
Oh wow! I didn't
Yeah.
realize. I thought it was later in the timeline that happened. Okay.
No, that happened really, really, really early. And so, yeah, and so from there, from that time, um, I think my idea, or what I was thinking, was obviously I couldn't just tell them, no, I'm not going to do this for you, right? Because then obviously then they'll start picking on family members until, they found the right one, to put that pressure on so that they can have the pressure on me to get me to cooperate. So I was trying to keep the target on my back by cooperating with him, but at the same time, I was able to, sort of a built-in excuse with the pimp because he was calling me all the time still. He hadn't learned. So it's like, well, John's getting suspicious, so I can't do anything. So I could use that excuse all the time, which is what I did. And then on the flip side of that, I would tell John, hey, you should keep the car parked or your truck parked in the parking garage. We had a parking garage at the apartment we stayed at in Portland. And I said, keep your truck parked in here. Don't leave it out on the street. If you go out, don't go out by yourself. Let someone drive you around. So I was basically trying to protect him against the things that I knew that they were trying to plan to do to him. And I, of course, never made them a spare key to our apartment because obviously John would have known that it was me that gave it to them. So I didn't do that, and I obviously didn't put the poison in his food. I put it in the trash. And a quick little funny story about that: we were going to be, John and I were going to make dinner together, and but he got busy on a phone call, and so some hours went by. But I was really, really hungry, so I went ahead and cooked. And so he comes out of the bedroom, and he's like standing in the doorway. He smells the food, and he's like, "Oh, you cooked?" And so I was like, "Yeah, I was hungry." And so he was like looking like, all right, here we go. So he comes in the kitchen and he says, and I was like, well, do you want to eat? Are you hungry? And he was like, yeah. And I said, well, do you want to make your plate? And he's like, no, you make it. So he's watching me very, very closely. So what I did was, because I should say this as well, like we never spoke about things, but there were things that John said and did that let me know that he knew exactly what was happening as it was happening. So there was not anyone reporting to him, or maybe there was someone reporting to him what was going on with me, but he knew in real time what was happening. So he was never in any real danger from me. But again, I only assumed this, and later this was confirmed when we would later speak about all of these events. But so anyways, he's watching me. So I figured, okay, he probably thinks that there's something in the food. So what I did was I stirred it all together and I showed him, let him watch and see that I'm getting food from the same place I'm getting your food from, and just to kind of put his mind at ease. And so we had our dog Tequila, a red-nosed pit bull at the time. And so it was just a simple meal, broccoli, noodles, and chicken. And so he took some of the noodles and he threw them to Tequila, and he just watched and waited. And he later said to me that the reason he did that was because he knew that I loved the dog, and if there was something in the food, I wouldn't have allowed him to give her the food. So
Wow.
this is kind of the backdrop of our relationship. So this is why there was a lot of um, distrust, obviously. But at the same time,
Well, yeah,
there
somebody wanted you to kill him.
yeah, right, of course. But at the same time, I think for him, he wasn't so enamored by me, that's why he kept me around, and that's why he didn't, why he trusted me or whatever. That wasn't the case, he was very smart. He understood the danger that I presented to him, but at the same time, I think he recognized um, my lack of willingness to cooperate with them to do him any real harm, so I was in a hard place, it was a difficult place to be in. It would have been different, I assume, if I had been paid. Right now, that's a different motivation there. You really, we probably wouldn't have stayed together if that was the case. But because I was being still at that time when I would go to California, still getting beat up by the pimp, you know, because I wasn't doing the things, because I was making it difficult for them to, or for him to cash in on his payday, because he had to deliver whatever he promised them. And so it was just a very intense time for the first couple of years of our relationship. But um, even with all of that happening, there was still a partnership that was building, because, there were just a lot of times where we were in real danger, and and he could rely on me in those instances, and I could rely on him. So there were, again, it's just very complicated, but it was just something that was undeniable. This connection that we had, and so that superseded everything else that was going on.
Well, yeah, you definitely can say the connection was undeniable. I mean, you can see it just like I said in the videos you guys are making. It just you can see it. You could definitely see it. So when did things like start to get crazy as far as like when, all right, we got to get out of the U.S.?
Um, well, so well, there was always something happening. There was always something happening. There was a big thing that happened um, in 2013, the first year we were together. And so that would have been around John's birthday. So I should tell you that in the July or August of 2013, the Belizean soccer team had come to play soccer in Portland, Oregon, of all places. And so after they came to play soccer, we started noticing people, people of color who looked Caribbean, who were now in our neighborhood. They didn't live there; they were just kind of milling around. Um, and so that was very strange because we lived in a very white area. And so I was the blackest person that lived there. Obviously, people came there. There was lots of shops and things that were around. But as far as anyone living there that I noticed, I was, the blackest person there. So you notice when, the dynamics of a neighborhood starts to change. And so then we started noticing people sort of hanging out around in front of our building, you know. We lived right on a corner, not a very big building, and so there would be people at the pizza shop for hours, just sitting maybe with a drink, kind of watching our building. And so what happens then, just before John's birthday, which is September 18th, so just before that, I think it was maybe the 12th of September, there was a report that he died of an overdose in Vegas. It came out in the news. And so John's getting phone calls all day from, friends and family asking him if he's okay. And that's when he actually puts out the tweet that the news of my death has been greatly exaggerated. I think it was something to the effect of what he tweeted out. So after that, our security that we had living with us at the time was arrested for bogus, trumped up child abuse charges. And so we were on our own. So now we fast forward to around the time of John's birthday, and we were binge watching Family Guy, right? And so we had taken a break in between, and our apartment was on the fourth floor where we could see the street. And so I saw this white pickup truck pull up to the street. You look down and see the street. They pull up to a light pole, and the person gets out of the car, and with a flashlight, he flashes it 4 times down our street, obviously signaling someone. And so then I told John about it, and so he immediately turns the lights off, and he's in full on go mode right now. He's watching, and he's trying to figure out what's happening, get a handle on our situation. So he tells me that he can hear motorcycles idling like down the block, and I couldn't hear it. I didn't know what to listen for, so I didn't hear it. So I ended up eventually going to bed. So he comes and wakes me up about 2ish in the morning, and he says, "Get up, we have to go now. Get dressed, we have to leave." And so I'm, like, "What's going on? What's happening?" He's like, "We have to go now. I don't have time to explain." And so I'm still trying to get him to explain it. He's like, "Listen, I have to go. You can stay here if you want to, or you can come with me." And so I'm like, "Okay, I'm coming with you." So we leave our dog, and we run down to the opposite end of our hallway, down the stairs, and we get into our parking garage. And inside our parking garage, the lights are motion activated. So obviously they turn on because we're in the parking garage. John's running around like a crazy man, trying to figure out where we can hide. So our building was on top of a coffee shop as well as a dentist's office. So there was a lot of doors as well where you could put storage, and obviously a door to get into the coffee shop and the dentist. And so he's trying all these doors, but they're locked. So he comes to the trash room where they have the big dumpster, and he's like, get in here and let's hide. And I'm like, ew, I'm not getting the trash. So he's like, okay, fine. And so in the parking garage, it was sort of like an elevator system. So there was an underground level of parked cars, and then the main level, and then an upper level. And so he turns off the light in the trash room, closes the door, and then he looks up at a car that's on the upper level in the parking garage, and he says, well, can you climb up here? And I was like, yeah. So we climb up there. We hide under a car. We get settled. The lights eventually go off. Okay. So we're sitting there, and in my mind, I'm like, this is so crazy. They're going to kick us out of this apartment. When they see us on their security cameras running around the parking garage like crazy people in the middle of the night. And so as I'm thinking this, the lights come on in the parking garage. You don't hear anyone. No one's talking. No one gets in their car. The lights just come on. And they stayed on all night. So again, you couldn't hear anyone, but you could feel them moving. You could just feel the breeze of them moving through the parking garage. And then there was a lot of commotion happening in the lobby. A lot of people, you could hear people talking. You can hear people going up the stairs. You could hear these things. It's really, quite noisy. And so then we hear a garbage truck, what sounded like a garbage truck, pull up out front. And so I think about 4 a.m. ish, they roll out the garbage bin from the trash room, and they roll it out to the garbage truck. They dump it, and then they compress it and roll the bin back in. And then from the lobby, all of a sudden you hear someone yell out, fuck. And so I'm assuming it's because they realized we were in the trash. And so by now, so many hours have passed. They don't know where we are because we're not in our apartment. And we couldn't have gotten out. There was really only one way for us to get out, and we would have been running right into their arms, So, and they didn't have the time to search for us any longer. It's now coming up on 5 o'clock, and soon people would be getting up, to go to work. And literally all they had to do, whoever was in the parking garage, all they had to do was bend over and look under the cars. They would have seen us. No problem.
That's such a wild story. Do you think those were people from Belize, or what kind of people do you think those were that were looking for you?
I think it was definitely. So John had always said that that's where his problems originated from, which is why I shared in that video that you had posted with, I think her name was Jenna from Adult Swim, that interview he had done, and he was speaking about the laptops he had gifted. So that happened in Belize. All right, he had gifted those laptops in Belize to the secretaries of the higher up Belizean people that were high up in office in the Belizean government. Because that's the raid he was talking about. They raided his property and destroyed his lab.
Yeah.
And so that's what he was referring to. And so they found out about that. They found out about these computers that he had gifted, right?
Oh, wow.
And
They
they were
had to be
happy
so
about that.
furious. Yeah.
And so that's why. And so John always, he shared with me that he felt his neighbor being killed was actually a botched hit on him. They just went to the wrong American's house. And so that's what he fully believed. And so he always said to me that he felt like that he understood that those problems followed him to America, and that's what was happening in that instance. Because obviously the cartel can operate freely in America; they still do, right? A lot of politicians, I'm sure, are on their payroll. So not just politicians, I'm sure a lot of officers, FBI, I'm sure they have a lot of people on their payroll.
Oh,
But
Border Patrol, you name it. Yeah.
So that's just one big incident. But that incident for me kind of solidified in my mind that, okay, whatever's happening with this man is way more serious than whatever my pimp is into. Because my pimp didn't even know that was happening. I had no idea that was happening, which was why when he came and woke me up, I was like, what are you talking about? Like nothing's going on because, right? Because the pimp didn't tell me of anything. So how could something be going on? So, but clearly this was way above the pimp's pay grade, a very sophisticated operation. And there were things that happened throughout our time in America. But fast forward to, let's see here, maybe around Thanksgiving of 2018, John gets a phone call from his lawyer in Tennessee who says that he had been summoned to give testimony in a grand jury about John. And so he didn't know what exactly they wanted, but he was just letting John know what was going on. And so we later found out that myself, John, and four other people were named in this secret grand jury. And so as people of interest for what I didn't know. Again, at the time we didn't know. So John then was saying that we have to leave America, just because of obviously there's no way to fight those sort of things because you can't have an attorney when you go and when you're summoned into a grand jury. It's kind of designed for you to be uh, arrested, right? Or whatever it is that they want the outcome to be. It's kind of designed in that way for that
Yeah,
outcome to
it's
be the
stacked
outcome.
up against you for sure.
Yes, yes, thank you. And so we decided to leave. John, in the meantime, he had actually already purchased boat, which was the Freedom Boat. And there was a lot of maintenance work that needed to be done on the boat. So that was
Was that
happening.
from the Wolf of Wall Street? Like it says in the
I'm not sure actually. I don't
Okay.
know. But so that had been happening, throughout the summer. So John had already, I guess he was already planning on eventually leaving. Things are just getting more and more tense. There were some things that happened with John. And so it just, I guess for him was becoming clear that it was time for him to leave. He wasn't sure if I would be joining him. And I wasn't sure as well either. But
Did it take a lot of convincing from him to get you to like jump on
no,
that boat and go?
no, honestly. But I mean, he said, I remember one time we spoke and he was like, well, yeah, we have to leave America. And I guess whatever look was on my face, he kind of changed that. And he said, well, I'm leaving. He said, and you can come or you can stay, but I have to leave. And so it was the same conversation, that we had had. It took me back to that conversation in Portland when he came and woke me up in the middle of the night, I have to leave, but you can stay. And so, I just, sort of really was building a more solid connection with my kids. And it was a hard decision, but I just felt like if I stayed, then they would try to use me to get to him. And I didn't want to put him in a position where he would have to choose, if he would have chosen. I don't even know that he would have, but I just didn't want to put him in that position. Also, more importantly, I watched enough movies to understand that they always go after the wife. But by that time we were not married anymore legally in America. So, but still, that didn't mean that they weren't going to come after me because of course they were going to come after me, right? Because whatever information or whatever they
Yeah,
thought
you
I
were a
might have
direct
had.
line.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So if nothing else, I'm a survivalist. And if nothing else, I'm going to make sure, I survive, right? That's just what I'm going to do. And so that was also a great motivator as well. And I just felt like, I couldn't stay with my family and put them in direct danger because that could have potentially put them in danger as well. So it just made sense for me to leave. So no, it didn't take a lot of convincing for me to leave.
Okay. So I guess my question now is when do these Netflix guys show up again? Because they were taping John before that in Central America when he was doing all that stuff before he met you. Is that correct?
Yeah. So there were, to my understanding, this person, it was Robert King, who is the photo journalist, who actually was the one that was filming in Central America when John was on the run in Belize. With also, there was another man that was with him. And then um, I met Robert when John and I first were together, I think in January of 2013. So that's when I met Robert. And because there was going to be sort of a documentary that John was working with people to, kind of film him because he wanted to tell his story. And so Robert King was around for that. And then he came back with us. John invited him to leave with us from America so that he could film that as well. And so there was no Netflix thing at all at the time. There's no talk of Netflix. It was just Robert filming. Robert, on our journeys with us as we were, leaving America and traveling a little bit in the Caribbean. And so the
Okay, was
Netflix.
Robert around like in the middle years, like when you were in Portland? Did he ever pop up to do any
Not,
work, or was it just kind of like a project that just kind of came together every now and then?
not at that time. So early, so the early years of us being together, there was just discussion. So when I met Robert initially, it was because he had this footage from Belize, and John was looking to, do something with that. Maybe make a documentary or a movie or something with that. And so that was when Robert came back on the scene. After that, we didn't hear from him. Robert wasn't a part of our lives until we had gotten just before we were leaving America. That's when Robert came back into our lives because obviously John was leaving and he wanted this to be filmed. So Robert came on board then. Um, and yeah, I'm sorry. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, for sure. Do you think John was getting information that he didn't share with you about,
All the time.
dangerous stuff that was happening that he maybe didn't want to scare you?
Yes, all the time. And it wasn't about not wanting to scare me because he always shared with me if there was danger. Like he would always say, listen, don't go out at nighttime. And that would just last for, a few weeks or whatever, until he told me that, things were clear. So I understood, because we had been through so many things. So he was always going to tell me if danger was afoot. He was always going to tell me if there was someone around him that he didn't trust or that he was concerned about. And I was always going to share that with him as well. Like, I think you should look out for this person, and he'd be like, well, why? I don't know. I just have a feeling, just keep an eye out on him, so we had that kind of trust, right? Where he understood that I understood that keeping him alive was in my best interest. Keeping him healthy was in my best interest. So
Yeah,
you
I
know,
mean, you guys hid underneath a car all night with each other. I think
yeah.
you earned
So
it at that point.
so he always shared with me when he felt that, times were tense, and I would stay armed, you know, um, and we just looked out for each other in that way.
Okay, so you guys take off from America now,
Yeah.
because he doesn't want to stick around in case they grab him for these trumped up tax stuff. Is it to do with crypto?
Not at this time. It was only the income tax situation. And they were
Okay.
saying that they were calling it fraud, which how can it be fraud when he hadn't been filing taxes, right? Like fraud means
You're
that you
cheating the
filed
system.
and you lied on
Yeah.
your tax, and so he hadn't filed. He also was very public about not filing taxes. He also wrote to the IRS yearly to tell them he wasn't paying taxes. So this was not a surprise to them to know that he wasn't paying his taxes, nor was he going to pay them,
When
right?
did
So
he decide he was not paying taxes anymore?
when he came back to America, that's sort
Okay.
of the stance that he took, and so obviously they could have come and taken property and taken money out of bank accounts. They could have done all of that, but they did none of that, so I guess it wasn't until he ran for president in 2016 that the powers that be, if you will, started realizing, okay, he may actually be a problem. And at that time, he was also speaking about crypto and how crypto could free us from the tyranny of, the financial control that they have over us, with the current financial state. So he was speaking about that a lot, and he was doing talks all over the world at the time, and so obviously they couldn't have that. So we leave on the Freedom Boat with our dogs. But this time we have 4 dogs, a red-nosed pit bull named Tequila, a big white Commodore fluffy dog. He looked like a sheepdog or just really big dog. That was Marley. And then we had our 2 German Shepherds, Axel and Duchess. And we had like 30 guns because obviously we couldn't leave our guns there. You don't just leave your guns behind.
Now, were you trained to shoot? Did you go to the range and everything?
I had with the pimp, but he had to stop that once he found out how good I was. I just have a natural gifting for shooting. It's just sort of a
Good for you.
natural thing. And so John, obviously, we didn't go to ranges, but we did shooting together, and so he felt fairly confident that I could, handle myself if need be. So yes, we're on our boat. We get to Bimini in the Bahamas, and so you have to go through customs and immigration, right? When you come on the boat, you have to declare what you have. So here we are with our 30 guns, all of them unloaded because John, obviously has traveled on boats before, so he knows sort of the international laws and about how you can be armed. And so I'm really thinking, like, how is he going to manage this? Because this is insane. This is an insane amount of guns, an insane amount of ammo. And what is he going to say? So he, and you could see the immigration officers, they're coming on, their eyes are like big, like what, like deer in headlights big, like what is going on? Because the guns were on our table, the dining table there, unchambered, unloaded, everything there so they could come and, take stock of what we had. And so John explained to them, that he had ran for president. He was running for president, and the dangers of that. And we had ex-military with us that was security. So, so he had this, spiel that wasn't, it wasn't a lie. He was running for president at the time for the 2020 election, although remotely, but he was still running. And um, so they understood the need to have security, but at the same time they were like, "This is crazy! Like you can't have all these guns. We can't let you keep all of these guns and all this ammo." So they
I
allowed us
was
to keep.
wondering that. I'm like, what? As I was watching the clips and stuff of all the guns getting pulled out, I'm like, what the
Yeah,
fuck are they thinking? Like, what is he telling them to like get out of this? And yeah, I guess if you're running for president, like that is a pretty valid excuse to be holding some weapons.
yeah. And then again, of course, he couldn't leave the guns, right? We couldn't leave them in America. There's no one like you don't leave your guns, right? Like you just don't do that, because they can be used for anything after that, you know.
Yeah, they got a serial
So
number on there. You could be a crime, and all of a sudden,
yeah.
yeah,
So
exactly.
so that's why we took them, right? And so they let us keep 3 of them. Obviously, they took the rest, and they let us keep I'm not sure a sizable enough ammo, but nothing crazy. Um, and so that was that. We're in the Bahamas now, and we make it to the reason why we went to the Bahamas because there is no income tax in the Bahamas, and so in order to be extradited, in order for America to have extradited him back to America, the crime that he's being accused of has to be a crime in the country that he's in. And so because the Bahamas doesn't have income tax, we were safe there. And so what then happens is that John gets word from who or from where, I don't know, but he gets word that they were going to try to come and arrest him for something, anything, drunken, disorderly conduct, whatever, anything to just get him into custody so that they could then ship him back to America. And so instead, he and I went into hiding in the Bahamas and for a few days. And by this time, we had security cameras installed on the boat, and so we had footage of the officers coming onto the boat looking for John to arrest him. And so I think after that, John made the decision that we were going to leave and go to Cuba. And obviously, there's no explanation of why we would have chosen Cuba. No explanation needed, I should say, of why we chose to go to Cuba, because obviously there's no cooperation between Cuba and America. So we were relatively safe there as well.
Does he have connections everywhere, like on land? Does he know somebody everywhere?
Um, yeah, I don't know. Like there were just certain things we didn't discuss because certain things were just above my pay grade, right? Certain things were just not something that he would have shared with me. So I don't know who he knew, or if he knew anyone in Cuba. I think we were just from what I could see, we were just meeting people as we traveled to places, right? A cab driver, or the we where we stayed in the Bahamas. There was the place that we were staying at was Choppy Waters. So the person who owned Choppy Waters, which was Choppy, he became an ally, obviously, that John used, and through that relationship, he was able to meet other people on the island for security, for information, for whatever he needed. So to my knowledge, when we arrived somewhere, he would find someone that he could talk to that for whatever reason, we may have needed their services or their assistance. And then from there, they would just introduce him to other people, in the area. So the same thing happened in Cuba. We had a cab driver who was really trustworthy. And so he would take us around. He would, introduce us to people. And so that's how we sort of formed relationships. And so we get to Cuba. We're cool in Cuba. We're chilling. And then John and I go out. We're riding bikes, and so we were staying at the Hemingway Marina in Cuba, and so we were riding our bikes in the marina, and someone came to our boat. So when we came back to the boat, we were told that someone from the military had come to the boat looking for John, and had left this paper that said, with an address, date, and time, and said, John needed to be there because for whatever reason he was being summoned. So I go with him, and the place looks like an old like army barracks or something. It just it looks very. We were very unsure of what was going to happen going in there, and the cab driver, as well, was even a little nervous about us going there, and so because he didn't know what was happening. Obviously, he's Cuban, so he'd be clued in. He could ask questions of people, but I guess he didn't have any idea as well. So, anyways, we go in there. We meet this general who tells John that America is putting pressure on them. And although they appreciate John being there, and the tweets that he's was sharing at the time were very pro Cuba, not pro Cuban government, as people mistook the tweets. I don't know how they did that. It was just pro Cuba, the people there, and life there. Although life is difficult, and it still is difficult there, but the spirit of the people is just so beautiful, that they haven't allowed that to crush their spirit. And so that's kind of what John and I both were in awe of, and why Cuba is such a special place for me. But anyways, so this general, he's expressing, that gratitude or whatever. But he said, you have to leave. Like, you can't stay here because, because of this pressure that's being put on them to send John back to America. And so they gave us 72 hours to leave Cuba. And we had just sent our boat captain on vacation because he had been with us for a while at that time. And so we're trying to get him back. And that leads us up to I think we had like maybe 6 hours to go out of the 72 hours. So we are pushing it kind of tight. And every day, maybe once every day or each day from the start of the deadline, someone would come and say, hey, what's going on? Are you leaving? And John would tell them, if I have to swim to get off this island, I will do that because I'm going to leave here within the 72 hours because we weren't sure when the boat captain was coming back. So anyways, we leave Cuba. And this time we go to the Dominican Republic. And so this was a really hard trip, 4 days. It took us to get from Cuba to the Dominican Republic. We had ran out of water. We had ran out of food. Um, and it was just the waters were rough. Everybody was miserable. We stank. We were hungry. And we were just so happy to get to the Dominican Republic. But when we pulled into the marina, all of the boats that were there in the marina had been moved to the backside of the marina. So all of the boats. So when you first initially come in, it was completely, all the lanes were completely empty. And so, and then there were also soldiers, or well, at least they were dressed as soldiers, standing with high powered weapons strategically placed, in these empty lanes. And they directed us in to pull in. And so, to me, this was very strange. I'm like, what's going on? But we weren't concerned. John wasn't concerned either. But it just looked strange. Like what, it's not something that I had become accustomed to when we pull into marinas. And so we had our guns laid out like we always did, ready with our passports. Because we're hungry. We saw there was like a casino restaurant that was there, hotel that was right there in the marina. So, we're all looking forward to getting showered and getting fed and giving the dogs a good walk so they could stretch their legs and all of the things. And they wouldn't let us off the boat. We had to stay on the boat for hours. We were waiting. Maybe 2 or 3 hours. We were waiting for someone from immigration or to come onto our boat so that we can get, sort of checked into the country as you do. There's procedures that you have to go through. And so they wouldn't let us off the boat. And once there was someone that came, I believe from immigration, finally, that came to come on our boat. And they asked us for our phones immediately. And they made us stay out on the back of the boat, on the outside of the boat, while they went inside of our boat. And we weren't allowed to go inside. We had to have the dogs locked up in the captain's quarters. They're barking, going crazy because we just had a 4-day trip. They need things. They're hungry and they've got strangers on the boat. I don't know what they were doing, but obviously we found out later they were searching our boat. For what, I don't know. And so that's about another hour or two or so. I don't know. By this time, the immigration office is now closed, and so we can't check in, whatever. So they do let us off to go and get something to eat. So we go right there to the restaurant that's right there at the marina, and we're eating and drinking, and we're just obviously commenting on how strange these events are, right? These heavily armed soldiers, guarding our boat, like for what? Like we're hardened criminals or whatever. And so then we leave, or we're leaving, and one of the gentlemen that was dressed as a soldier earlier in the day came back in plain clothes in a pickup truck, and he's saying, "Yeah, we have we have an apartment for you guys to stay in. So you guys have to come with us. Come and get in our truck and come with us." And it was just John and I. They were trying to get into their truck, and so John immediately he figures out what's happening, and I'm like, I'm not going with you. Like, I don't even know who you are. You're not appropriately dressed, what is this? You're in a civilian vehicle. You're dressed as a civilian. I'm not just going to randomly go with you in the middle of the night to some apartment in God knows where, right? So John then fakes a medical emergency, right? He kind of pretends to sort of not pass out, but kind of get weak in his knees and, kind of falls to the ground. And so immediately I'm like, in go mode. Okay, get an ambulance. You see him, he's, on the ground. He actually didn't look well as well, but I think it was just the journey and a little bit of acting as well. But, we were all exhausted. So eventually they did call an ambulance, and they allowed the ambulance to take him to the hospital. I rode with him in the ambulance and went to the hospital, and we stayed there overnight. And so in the morning, they took us then back to, I believe it was back to the marina, maybe, or I'm not sure how the exact events happened, but we ended up in a jail. But they didn't put us in the cells. They put us in like the cafeteria area for the officers. So by this time, it's me, John, two of our Bahamian, well, one Bahamian security, one Haitian from who came from the Bahamas with us, but he was more like maintenance or just um, he ran errands for us or whatever we needed. So him as well. Robert King was with us and the boat captain. So so we're all in this cafeteria trying to figure out what is going on. Like why are we here now? Like why are we not speaking with immigration? Like what is exactly happening at this time? And so uh, we stayed there. They keep us there for like 4 days. And I should mention John had a sizable amount of cash on him. So this was also okay. I'm sorry, I need to run back a little bit. Am I rambling too much? Do you guys want to interject at all? I'm sorry.
No, keep going. The only thing is, keep your phone a little bit more still when you're talking, because you're getting a little bit of like the wind kickback.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good.
Okay. So I'm just going to run back a little bit. So John, when we got to the Bahamas, initially John had his bank accounts closed out, and so there was 500,000 in cash that was brought to him. So in the Netflix documentary, when you see us armed on the boat and we're looking under our bed, and I'm joking about shooting Robert King in the dig. That's what was happening. That was the backdrop of that.
That was that moment.
We had
Okay.
this cash on us, and obviously, the fangs are out, right? And what happened to the majority of the cash? I don't know. Obviously, that's not my business. John would not have shared that with me. But when we got to the Dominican Republic, he still had about 100,000 in cash on him. And so after this 4 days of us being in this detainment center, they allowed us to go back to the boat and to get our belongings because we were going to be leaving. And so when we got back to the boat, the officer that went with us um, asked John to show him where the money was hidden because apparently, just from him asking that, it became very clear. Well, that's what they were looking for. That's what they were trying to find. Because you have to declare that amount of money, right? So we declared it in Cuba um, when we went to Cuba, so they would have known, that we had that, and obviously we. I don't think he didn't declare it at the time in what am I trying to say, in the Dominican Republic. He didn't, for whatever reason, he didn't declare it. Like he didn't have it out ready for them to count. And so again, they asked him to show them where he had the money hidden, which was really, really strange. And so anyways, he does that. They allow us to collect some belongings, and they take us back to this place, to the same place where we had been detained. And then they tell us that they're going to take us to the airport and send us, let us go on our way. And so it became clear as time was getting later and later that they weren't taking us to the airport. So they take us to another detainment center, um, where it looked like an old sort of tow yard. I don't know, it was really weird. They had all the men prisoners in a barn, a really large barn, and the women were in their regular sort of barracks, and that's where I was sent to. And John and the other guys, they were in the area where the men would have been, where there were bunk beds and things. And so that's where those pictures came from of John. When you see John in the jail and he's shirtless and he's on a bunk bed with no mattress, those pictures were taken during at that time. And so he didn't smuggle a phone in his butt. We had our luggage with us, so there was a phone that I had in my luggage that wasn't on. It wasn't connected to any network or anything. But so he found that, and that's how he was able to take those pictures in the prison. And then obviously Robert had his camera as well. So so then after that, so John has the money, and they actually count the money before taking it from him when we get into that facility. And John asked them for a receipt, to which they were like so dumbfounded, like, "Why are we giving you a receipt?" But I guess for John, he was like, "No, I want a receipt so he could have a written record that they took the money to make sure that they would give it back." And so then the next morning they take us to the immigration office, and we finally are able to speak with immigration and get ourselves all checked in. But now the head of the immigration officer is telling John that he has to go back to America. Like, he can't go anywhere else. And so, according to international law, I don't know how true this is, but if you're being deported from a country, they can either send you back to where you came from or send you back, obviously, to your country of origin. But John had dual citizenship, and so he wanted to go to the UK and not America. But they were saying, no, you have to go back to America. You can't go anywhere else. And so John he ends up hiring two lawyers, and he asked them to, put a stay of the deportation order in for the with the judges, so he can have his day in court, if you will. So during this time, um, John's trying to stall because they need time. The lawyers need time to go to the judge and get this, this stay of deportation. And so John comes to me in this little office we're sitting in, and they're bringing his money now so they could count it, count it out and give it back to him. So that's what he was waiting for. So he comes to me and he says, "Listen, don't worry. I'm just doing my thing." And so I'm like, okay. So he was just right across the hall, and there's, glass walls. You could see through the walls, anyways. And so I could see him just across the hall in another office area. And they start counting the money, and then I see him fall over on the floor. And so, um, immediately I'm trying to put on my best acting, oh my God, what happened? And I'm trying to get
Yeah,
the tears
you
to
knew it was
come.
showtime, like when you saw him
Yeah,
go down.
yeah. But the tears wouldn't come. I couldn't get him to come. So it's just, but I was like, oh my God, what happened? Check on him, help him. And it was so funny. I wish we could have had a picture of it, because the people there were like looking at him like, sir, get up. Like, we know you're faking. because at this time, it was widely reported of him faking a heart attack in Belize. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah, it was very well documented. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it was really funny. So eventually they assisted him, and this time he pretended like he had had a stroke, and he didn't recognize anyone. So when Steve, one of our Bahamian security, came and was trying to talk to him, and he was like, "Sir, sir," and John was like, "No, get away from me! I don't know you. Who is this person? Where am I?" It was just so funny. He's like, "Where's my wife?" So they're like, "Okay, let her go and talk to him, because this is insane." And so I go and I whisper in his ear and I tell him, "Hey, they're sending me to the airport now, so I'm leaving, and I love you, but I gotta go." And so, because they were sending us back to our countries of origin, obviously. So me and Robert were going back to America. Steve was going to the Bahamas, and the Haitian gentleman was going back to Haiti. I forget his name. Um, and so that's what they were doing in that moment. And so he says, okay. And so they take us, and we've got our luggage, and we're on our way to the airport. And as soon as we get to the airport, they get a phone call saying to bring me back because John was in the hospital. And so, so I get to the hospital, and obviously he was fine. There's nothing wrong with him, but they didn't know what to do, because obviously he didn't recognize anyone, right? And he's still acting hysterical or whatever. And so,
He went
um,
full retard.
yes, never. You should never go full retard, but I guess it
Yeah.
comes with the situation. So, um, so yeah, they're trying to do this. They're trying to run tests on him, but he's like, "No, I don't need you to do that," because obviously he's just trying to stall for the attorneys to come back with news of if they were able to succeed with getting the stay of deportation, which they were. They eventually came to the hospital and said that, and then the head of the immigration office, the one who was telling John he had to go back to America. He was the one that came to the hospital and said, "Okay, where do you want to go?" And John said, "I want to go to the UK." So they bought our tickets, mine and John's tickets, um, to go to the UK, and they took us to the airport. And on our flight from the Dominican Republic to the UK, John was able to find a hotel for us to stay in, um, paying crypto with Bitcoin. I wish I could remember the name of the hotel, because it was a really nice one in London. And so this happened on a Friday, right? So we were comfortable, we were safe, obviously, because there's nothing going to be happening. Obviously, we're all familiar with the relationship that America and the United Kingdom have, right? So obviously, you could understand why we would have been unsafe there. But because it was Friday, no government officials are working on Friday, so nothing could happen to us, over the weekend. So we were safe and comfortable. John put out a tweet wanting to meet people, and we went out and we were going to go to a strip club, but that didn't happen. But it was just a nice time. And so, but by Sunday morning, we'd already sussed out how we were going to leave from the UK. And so we had done that. That's exactly what we did. We left Sunday morning, um, before the government could get back to their offices on Monday, because we would have had a serious problem if we were still in the UK on Monday. So we left, and eventually we made our way into Spain, and that's where um, we arrived in Spain maybe August of 2019, and that's where we were until John was arrested.
Yeah, I actually saw a tweet today my brother sent to me. It was of John. There was like he said he was building a mud wrestling arena. Yeah, like it was like a picture of him on a crane, and I think he had just arrived in Spain.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
and basically planting an olive tree, which is really nice. And so all of those, so the video of the Faraday cage, I just want to say that was from that time when we first got to Spain, to the old video. Um, and it wasn't where we slept or anything. It was just a room that we communicated from. So we would go in there if we wanted to get on the internet, or for me to call my family. Um, and so that's what we did. And it worked very, very well. So I would suggest that to people who can afford it, because obviously it was very expensive, but yeah.
so okay, and you're now in Spain. When do things go south in Spain? How does that happen?
um, I don't know. We were doing a lot of traveling as well while we were in Spain, so mm, I'm not sure exactly how things went south, because like I said, we were doing a lot of traveling, and so John was, we were flying from the Barcelona airport, and John never had a problem with his passport. Um, and so he was planning a trip to go to Turkey, and that's why how he got arrested at the airport, because he was on his way to Turkey. And what John explained to me after he got arrested and we were finally able to speak, he said what happened was when he gave his passport at the airport to be, checked in or whatever, that his passport had been flagged as stolen. And so they detained him because of that. And so while he was detained, that's when this red notice warrant then materialized. And now he was being um, held for this warrant that just magically materialized. And I say magically because we had maybe just the month before had traveled to Germany, um, and while we were actually literally in the air, the COVID restrictions were reinforced in Germany, and so once we got there, we had to turn back around. So he didn't have a problem with his passport. He was able to get on that flight, no problem. Um, and so I don't know how that happened, but that's what happened. How he was detained and arrested, and how he ended up in prison.
So you weren't harassed or anything in Spain. It was just him going to the airport and then them just picking him up.
Yeah, that was just, well, there was we weren't harassed in Spain. No, we were relatively safe there, obviously. But obviously John was sharing um, tweets and pictures and things, so maybe from that, I don't know, because there was a picture of him in front of a restaurant in Spain that was near where we were staying, and honestly, I'm just speculating now. I genuinely don't have any idea how that happened, so I really don't know, so I don't want to keep speculating on that.
Sure. So John goes into jail. Are you able to see him at any point after he's arrested?
I was able to, but he didn't want me to visit him because he didn't want to he didn't want to put me in danger, obviously, because if I go there, I could have potentially been followed back to where we were staying, and also he just didn't want to see me in prison. He said it would have hurt too much to.
Well, sure, they could have arrested you for some charge you didn't even know existed either.
Yeah, that as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
so no, I didn't see him, but we spoke every day. We spoke 3 times a day. The phone calls were only 8 minutes apiece, so it was one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and one in the evening. But yeah, we spoke every day. He, you know, initially it was a little rough for him, I would say.
Yeah, I was gonna
Kind
say,
of
how was
settling
his
in.
spirits?
Kind of settling into that. It was a little rough because it took a little time for us just to be able to speak to each other. I think maybe a week or two it took for the phone system and all of that to be set up and for him to get those privileges, I guess. So it took time for that to happen. But in the meantime, I had sent him clothes because you could send clothes to your people in prison, and so you could wear street clothes. They didn't provide you with those things. Um, Shoes, everything that he needed that I thought to just get him through until I was able to speak with him. So once I did that, he was started obviously asking for books, me to send him books and um, any other things that he needed. And we shared the address of the for the prison to on Twitter so that people could write to him. I don't know if he ever got any mail from anyone, um, because when I
Did
went to
he?
pick up his
Did,
belongings from the
did he
prison,
tweet a few times from prison?
yeah, he did.
He
It's
did,
all.
right? I do remember. Okay, yeah. I wasn't sure if that was you or if that was him. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, it wasn't him. Well, it wasn't him himself tweeting, right? Obviously, he was dictating the tweets to me, and then
Ah, okay.
I was
Okay.
getting them tweeted out. But yeah, that's what was happening. So yeah, initially it was, it obviously was taking a toll on him initially, just trying to settle into life in prison, and so had this have happened, had what happened to him in June had happened to him maybe earlier on, maybe I could have been swayed to believe that he might have been willing to do that to himself, just because there was just again the adjusting, right, and all of that. The conversations weren't. Um,
Was he confident he
he
was
wasn't
gonna
always
get out?
not at that time, not initially. He wasn't
Yeah.
sure. And so but once we had the attorney Javier, who was um, who was helpful, but he wasn't as knowledgeable as as we would have liked as far as relating to extraditions. And so, um, but John was able to find another attorney through someone who had written to him while he was in prison, and he had me reach out to this person. And so we were able to hire John an additional Spanish attorney who actually was very knowledgeable in extraditions. And so when John met this additional attorney, he was very confident that things could be favorable for him going to the court, because this man had gone up against the U.S. in immigration cases before. So yeah, he's very confident in these two attorneys now. But by the time uh, by the time maybe twenty March of 2020. So he had by that time 5 attorneys. So he had 2 Spanish attorneys, two American attorneys, one representing the Tennessee case, which was the tax related charges, and then one representing the New York case, which the SEC had brought after he was already arrested. And so I think those charges came as a way to ensure that they had, their hooks deep enough into him, right? And so, um, and then he also had an attorney in the UK because obviously he had the dual citizenship. So there was a team of attorneys that were working on his case. And so when when he goes before the court now, when he's scheduled to go to court in June, um, we had already discussed with the attorneys what the plan was for appeals. Everybody, we all knew that they were going to likely grant the extradition. So this wasn't a surprise to any of us. It wasn't a surprise to John. It wasn't a surprise to his attorneys or to myself that they ended up granting the extradition. And there was a plan in place for what the next steps were going to be. So, um, so the day of June 23rd, I spoke to John twice. I spoke to him in the morning, a little earlier than usual because he was going to court. So it was about 7 in the morning when I spoke to him. And, we just had conversation kind of going over the things, obviously, me saying, obviously, we're optimistic and hopeful that they won't grant the extradition, but at the same time, though, we understand that they probably will. So, this is to be expected, but your attorney said he would, he's going to be there, he's going to meet you in the court. And this was just a regular conversation. And so, when he came back from court, he called me again around 11, 12-ish. And obviously was disappointed, but again, not surprised. And nothing in his tone, nothing in his conversation had uh, gave me a cause for concern. He sounded like the John he had been, at that time. Again, once he got this additional attorney, things were different as far as his outlook, and even a little bit before that, his outlook had changed, because he just obviously that's just who John was. He just had a warrior spirit, he wasn't just gonna lay down and die. He's
Yeah.
gonna fight till the bitter end, so um and so he, asked again, had I spoken to the attorney and what he had shared, but he also expressed his frustration because he was supposed to have a translator and there was no one there translating to him to tell him what was actually happening. So he didn't really know what exactly was said at the time. And um, he said that they let him speak and what he shared and all of that. And this was not his first time going to court. He had been to court before as well. So he knew, the procedure. Um, and he, yeah, and we spoke about the attorney coming to, the attorney had told me that he was going to come and see him on that Thursday or Friday. So before the weekend, he was going to come and see him. And that was basically the conversation. And we just chatted about other, things, my day or whatever. And, before he hung up, he said, I love you and I'll call you later. And that was that. That was the last time we spoke.
Wow. Yeah. And then how did you find out about what had happened to him?
Through a Twitter DM.
Through a Twitter DM.
Yeah, through a Twitter DM. So, um, so every day I would collect headlines for John because when he asked me to do that to kind of keep him abreast of what was happening in the world, and then sometimes he would tweet on those things or just to keep him um, sort of up to
Plugged
date
in.
of
Yeah.
what's happening. Yes, plugged in. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I was doing online. I was listening to music and just kind of chilling, waiting for this next phone call. And I happened to get on Twitter like I do, just randomly scrolling, and I get a notification of a DM. And in capital letters, it says, "Oh my, OMG, tell me this isn't true." And so immediately my mind goes to John. And so
Yeah.
I Google him, and that's how I found out
Wow.
that he, yeah, a fucking Twitter DM.
Yeah, that's bad. That's
Not the
horrible.
prison
Did
calling
then
his
and then they
attorney.
did
Not
at
the
any
prison
point did they
calling
make
my
a
phone.
at any
Nobody
point did they
called
make
me.
an effort to reach out to you or
No, nobody called me. They had my number because John had the number. So it's on their prison records, the phone numbers that he was calling.
sure.
They didn't even call his attorney
Yeah.
to tell his attorney. His attorney found out through Google.
Wow, that's so awful. I'm sorry you had to go through that. Now, were you ever able to confirm his body?
Yes,
You did.
yes, yes, I did.
Okay, so you can put all the conspiracies to rest that he might still be alive somewhere. That these people, everyone wants to hold on to hope. I mean, and if anyone was going to pull off something like that, it would be John.
Of
Um,
course, and I understand that. I understand the skepticism. I do understand that. I will say this. When I was able to see him, his chest was opened up. So I guess they were in the middle of the autopsy. So I could only see him from the neck down. Right? But I know who I saw. I know what I saw. Okay. And
sure,
it
you
was
live with the
John.
man. Yeah, you know his body.
So
Um,
so that's yeah, I hope that puts it, but of course that's not going to put it to rest because I still have people, and it is a bit frustrating
I
to
could
hear
imagine
about
it's got to be hard to
Telegram.
get closure.
And he's on Instagram, and there was a Q posted on his Instagram. Can I just put that to rest as well? John never had control of that Instagram account that tweeted or that posted a Q image. He never had control of that Instagram account. He never started that Instagram account. Someone else started it, and he actually tried to get control of it when he was running for president in 2016. But the person was asking for an amount of money that John was not willing to pay to gain control of the account. And so whoever put the queue up there, no, I don't know, but it definitely wasn't someone that was related to John because again, to my knowledge and to what John expressed to me during, or not even just to me, but to his campaign manager as well, because we were trying to get control of the Instagram account because it had a sizable following. And it was obviously another way for him to get his message out there. But we weren't able to do that because John wasn't willing to pay for the account to get access to the account. So again, that count was never under John's control, nor was the telegram. I don't know what this telegram is either. This official John McAfee telegram. It's not something John was never on Telegram like that. He did create a telegram because during the Team McAfee days, that's how the team members were communicating on Telegram. So they wanted him to get on there so that he could communicate with them there. But he hated Telegram. Twitter was where he used, that was his social media that he used, to the best of my knowledge. And so obviously people are going to think what they want to think, and that's fine. Um, and so I'm not here to prove anything to anyone. I'm just here to share with you what I know.
Yeah. Did John ever talk about having like a dead man switch?
Yeah, he talked about it, and I believe he had it. I believe. I don't know where it would have been or how it was, if there was like a physical sort of USB or whatever. I don't know the lingo, so I probably sound stupid, but whatever. I don't know where
Me
it would have
neither.
been
Don't
or
worry.
what form it would have been in. I don't know that because he never would have shared that with me because obviously it would have put me in danger, and obviously it was his ace in the hole. If things got ever too tight, obviously that's not something he would have shared with anyone. But I do believe that he had it. I don't believe that was that was a lie. I do genuinely believe that he did have it.
Do you think it ever got released out there? And then I guess the other question I had, that there was always controversy if he had a place in that condo that collapsed in Miami. Was there any connections to John within that condo?
I don't know anything about that condo. I will say it was strange that they sent an Israeli excavation team, to come in and excavate. Like, why did you have to send people from Israel to? At least that's,
Yeah.
that's what I've seen on the news, anyways. That there was a report that there was an Israeli excavation team. That just seemed really odd to me. That you'd come all the way from Israel to help with this building collapse. Like what would have been the significance? Like what was so important there. So obviously that does lend to the conspiracy
Uh-huh.
theory, if you
But you
will.
never had known of him owning any property in that building or nothing?
No, not to my knowledge. Not to my
Okay,
knowledge.
no.
No.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for telling that story. Are you willing to take some questions from some of the people?
Yeah, of course.
All right, cool. Let's I think Jake, if you're still here, if you want to, I think he may have had a couple questions for you.
Well, let me start by saying thank you for coming on, Janice. And it sounds like you and John really had something very special. And I'm so sorry to hear about everything that happened. It's just terrible. And to me, it seems to be evident that the global apparatus that has been constructed is able to target people all over the world, no matter what country they're in. And the judicial system in other countries are just as corrupt, if not more corrupt, than what we have here. Um, all of that being said, the nature to John's understanding about computers and stuff like that. Oh, I'm getting feedback. Okay. The nature to John's understanding about computers and stuff like that. I don't know if you know anything about or can comment on this, but I've heard that that it's possible that he had almost basically created something like a parallel internet of sorts that allowed him to kind of have his own internet infrastructure. And is it possible that this might be where this dead man switch would be?
Honestly, I really can't speak to that because I don't know, genuinely. Obviously, John was brilliant and he had a wealth of knowledge, and so, I don't know. Honestly, I can't say.
I figured. I just figured I'd ask. I after hearing the whole story, it's hard to know what to say. I'm speechless because it sounds like just harassment on the of the to the nth degree, and it's so not fair. It's so unjust. I guess my only question then would be to you: in what way could the people in the audience, myself, how could we help contribute to his memory in a positive way? Do you think?
Um, wow, that's a good question. I guess to just continue to spread his message, of freedom and privacy, and how both are essential to a free world, sharing the knowledge that he had. I'm doing my best to share that as well, but just to keep his memory alive because he was a brilliant man, and he wanted nothing more than to see um, people free, free from free from what they think they know life is, free from what they think the world around them is, and free financially, was very, very important to him. I guess in whatever way you feel honors that memory and that fight that he pursued.
He seems, according to what you're saying, to be a very kind and compassionate man that didn't deserve the kind of scrutiny and the kind of harassment that he received. Um, would you say that he was kind as well as compassionate as much as he was intelligent?
Definitely, he definitely was, and I mean, and I can only point to myself as an example of his kindness and his compassion because he could have very easily had me put in prison. Right. He could have very easily had me put under the prison, with what was going on with everything initially in the first years of our being together. And no one would have faulted him for that. I certainly wouldn't have. Um, and so, but instead, he had compassion on me and he understood the impossible situation I was in. Obviously, that didn't mean he didn't still protect himself from me, while still being with me. But I'm just saying that I think our relationship is a testament to his kindness and compassion, most definitely.
Now, Do you think that it's possible that the reason why he was considered such a threat to the system was because of his intimate knowledge of how it worked and operated?
Oh, definitely. So when he created the McAfee antivirus, he was, I believe he said his first clients was the military, CIA, FBI, all of those three-letter agencies. So that's, you know, those were his first clients, or biggest clients, I guess. As well, I think he said he worked for Booz, Booz Allen in Hamilton. He worked for NASA. Um, so yeah, he had knowledge, definitely. He had a top top security clearance, if you will. I think that's what they're called. He's worked on black projects. So obviously he would have been able to see behind the veil, if you will, of the intimate inner workings of these different agencies. So definitely he was a threat, and he was no longer controllable, right? And so someone with the knowledge that he has or had, that's no longer controllable, obviously would be a big threat.
Right. So, with that kind of level of intel and also not being able to be controlled, not being able to be blackmailed, large sums of money, weapons, and stuff like that. I mean, and the ability to either, take out a virus or plant one that could disrupt the system, they would see that as a threat, obviously. That being said, are you aware of any attempts, uh, other besides the pimp and stuff like that? But are you aware of any attempts? Did he ever talk about any attempts on behalf of any of these intelligence agencies or government apparatuses to blackmail him somehow or to compromise him in some way prior to your meeting?
No, he never shared anything specific like that. I think his overall concern was not with these agencies in general, but more, his concern was with rogue agents within these agencies, that could do him harm. And also, yes, there were many attempts that happened, after that, throughout the course of our relationship, and we moved around a lot because of it. So yeah, there were a lot of things. There was a lot of harassment that sort of never ended. That was kind of always at the backdrop of our lives.
Right. Now, considering how tech savvy he was things like hacking or technological harassment or anything of that nature ever attempted? Also, did he ever talk about any sort of like maybe psychic attacks or mental attacks or anything like that?
I'm sorry. One more time. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just
Um,
you got to
Sorry
mute
about
your mic, dear.
that.
Sorry. Um, So my question was given how tech savvy he was, did he ever worry or talk about the idea of being hacked or um, you know experiencing any cyber attacks? Or did he ever talk about like any sort of like mental or emotional attacks that he thought might be, say, related to frequencies or anything like that?
Nothing related to frequencies or anything like that, as you say. Worried about being hacked. I think John understood that, of course, he was being listened to at all times. And so, there wasn't a concern for hacking because he understood that he was always vulnerable to that, right? And so he operated and he moved in a way that protected him against that. So there was a lot of disinformation that he would communicate through his emails or through Twitter DMs, or that's just he was an expert at that, the disinformation. So, um, that's how he went about protecting himself from the obvious nature that he would be listened to, right? And so hacking was not really a concern. It was just the concern was that he was always being listened to at all times. And so how to shield himself against that and still live a relatively normal life considering. But I guess, any attacks on his sort of mental or emotional state would just have been, having to stay up for days at a time because he felt because maybe sometimes he didn't always share with me the threat, like what exactly the threat was or where it was coming from, because maybe he didn't know when it would come. So he had a lot of sleepless nights, which obviously that wears on a person. Um, and so it was things like that, not really able to rest, always having to be on guard would have been, I guess, a mental attack, I guess, if you want to categorize it as that.
What about AI? Did he ever say anything about artificial intelligence?
In what regard?
Well, in the regard of that it could be very dangerous, and that, you know, the linking of computers and the generation of some sort of an artificial intelligence, like a ghost in the machine. Did he ever have any concerns or express any concerns about that?
No, he didn't express anything like that.
Okay. Well, I mean, I would ask, and I'm because he probably wouldn't say. Did he ever talk about any of the classified tech or the black budget or anything like that? Did he ever say anything?
No, he may have briefly mentioned in interviews, not many. He didn't really speak about it a lot because obviously that wouldn't be smart. um, but he just spoke in general, the sort of his background of his work and you know, um, where he came from, I guess, how he had these sort of connections and I guess maybe to help people piece together why he would have been such a threat to people, to certain people.
Did he ever mention the Ericsson Corporation from Sweden that basically controls the entire telecommunications grid?
Not that I can remember.
Okay. Well, I mean, I've pretty much exhausted all of my questions. I figured he probably wouldn't say anything about the black budget or classified tech. Like you said, that's just not smart to do. You know, it's better to just kind of imply and let people know, yes, there is a black budget. Yes, there are these black projects. There's, money is going funny places that we don't know, going toward research and development that is not public, etc. Um, I mean, I just want to say I commend you for your bravery and your willingness to stick with him through the hardship. That's evidence of real love, and you know, I'm glad that you had the opportunity to experience that. And it's sad that it was taken from you in such a terrible way and in such a inhumane way. And I just want you to stay strong, and I'll keep you in my prayers.
Thank you, Jake.
Let's go to Jenny next. And then we'll get Bitcoin after that. And then Cheryl. Okay. Jenny, go ahead when you're ready.
Janice, I'm trying. I'm not going to cry, but I just want you to know that my heart is with you. And since the story started, I know you're a strong woman. And I just wanted to ask you, I mean, seriously, like my heart. I'm not just up here clout chasing or some weird shit. I want you to know my heart is with you. I know you guys loved each other. I know that your love was absolutely true. I've seen your pictures. I just know your strength. And I think it was beautiful that you were standing on the side of the street that day and he was down there and you asked that question. I think that's faith. And I think it's fate. I wanted to ask you, how would you like for us to remember him as we go on and teach our children to be half a man that he was? How would you want us to remember him?
Oh, he was just a man. He was just a man trying to live. and just he just wanted to be left alone, you know, but whomever, whatever powers that be, just wouldn't allow that to happen, and so because of that, he took the fight to them, in the way that he could, and I guess, and the way to honor that is to just live by your convictions. There's so much. The world is just so messed up right now, and people need people to speak the truth. You need people to speak the truth to power, speak the truth to the foolishness that we see happening in the world, and maybe that's not in such a big way, as John did it. Maybe you don't have such a large following, but maybe that's just to your neighbor, to your family, but just to speak the truth and share the truth, in love, not in hate, not in, um, well, I'm right and you're wrong, or, not in this sort of abusive way, but share the truth in love, because that's how we can reach people, is through love, like that's how John reached me. Like he didn't, we didn't fight about things. He didn't condemn me for the stupid decisions that I made time and time and time again, you know? He just gave me the space to figure it out, but he allowed me to figure it out, you know what I'm saying? And he lived in a truth that caused me to look to that and say, okay, what is actually happening around me? I need to be more tuned in here, because obviously what I thought the world was, it's not so, and so I better get smart and get educated here, you know. And I think that's the way that I think we can honor him, and remember him moving forward. So just remember that he was a man, just like, all of us. Well, I'm not a man, but you understand what I'm trying to say. But he was just a human being, just like all of us, and he wasn't more special than any of us. We all have the power to be John McAfee, if you will, to our own levels, right? Maybe not in the way that he was, and he never advocated for that. He never advocated for anyone to take up the life that he was living as a nomad and having to be on the run and all of that. But what he did advocate for um was not just laying down and dying, right? Not just keeping your head low because you don't want to pop your head up and be the one to be sacrificed. Sometimes we have to do the hard things. And this has been a hard thing for me to do, to stay here in Spain. But I couldn't allow what happened to him to just go unanswered. I had to stay here and get the answers that I could get. Granted, I still have so many more questions, but had I have not stayed here, I wouldn't have gotten the answers that I did get. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, and my heart is with you 100%. I know there's many more of us, and you are a strong example of an absolutely incredible woman.
Thank you very much. I'm just following my convictions, and that's all that we can do now. It's all that we can do. It's all that we should ever have been doing. But thank you.
Okay. Can you do a couple more questions, Janice?
Yes, yes.
Okay, cool. Bitcoin, go ahead.
Hey, what's going on, Janice? Hey, it's Raider. You might remember me back in Malta, in St. Julian's. Like, I'll never forget during the Malta Blockchain Summit, right? When first of all, you and John were like so like beautiful to me and like my small little team. There was like three of us, and you guys were just like so beautiful to us, right? But I'll never forget, and you probably remember this when you were in Malta and you were we had the conference, or not the conference room, but the big room where before John spoke, you have billions of dollars worth of wealth, right? Like sitting in this conference room, and John gets up and he's like telling everybody, he goes, you have the opportunity to do something real that can change the tragic state of this world. Like he's lecturing billionaires on the fact that they have, I'm a Bitcoin guy, but like he's lecturing these billionaires that you have the chance to actually do something positive with your wealth. And if you don't decide to do it, like that's your own fault and that's your legacy that you'll live. So my remembrance of John, having the privilege of meeting him in Malta, was like he just told people directly what they needed to hear, and I love it. I love you, Janice. I love John, and you guys showed so much love to people like me, like little people, and then you also told high level, rich, billionaires, princes. There was princes in the room, prime ministers, and John gets up on stage and says, if you don't use your wealth for good, what is the purpose of your wealth? That was the premise of his speech. And it was one of the most beautiful speeches I think I've probably ever heard. And he did it at the height of, he was being attacked. That was the height of him being attacked. Like he was on all fronts. John was at war. And he got up and he said, if you don't use your wealth for good, what is the purpose of your wealth? And it was just beautiful, Janice. And I'll never forget John for the speech that he gave. It was beautiful.
Yeah, that was actually one of my favorite. He was so on point. I think I don't know if that was for the night banquet, but I think we have I think I've shared it before, but I'll share it again. He did his when he did his keynote because he was really on fire and on point for that. Not to say that he wasn't always, but some speeches were better than others. And he was really on fire. Um, at that time, and he always that was just John's way. He just was a straight shooter, and I think having once been super wealthy, because once he came back from Belize, all of his wealth was gone because when he moved there, he had took all everything. When he moved to Belize, he was leaving America for good. He was going to retire in Belize, so he sold everything, and so all of his money was there, which was stolen because obviously his bank accounts were seized, his properties were looted. Um, One of his properties was even burned down. So all of his wealth, what he had, what he took to Belize, was gone. So what he came back to America with was simply the clothes on his back, and someone gave him 5,000 in $5 bills, which he paid me 1,000 of it our first night together. And so that's what he had. And then obviously I didn't know at the time, but he later shared with me that our road trip was him going around because he had strategically placed like little emergency stashes, if you will, in different areas. He was a big off-roader. He'd go off-roading and camping. So he had uh, apparently that's why we were stopping where we were stopping and why he would disappear for hours on end, because he was, going to collect these things. So whatever that amounted to, that's what he had, but he understood, once you get to a certain level, the things that people are motivated by, and also the influence that you have once you get to a certain level. And if you aren't trying to leave the world in a better place than what it is as you're living in it, then what are you really doing? If you have that sort of influence, like what are you really doing if you're not using that influence to better the world, around you first, for your family and those closest to you, and then for the world as a whole, the greater world. So yeah, no, thank you for sharing that.
Okay, Cheryl, if you want to go ahead next.
Hi, Janice. It's such an honor. Thank you so much for being with us. And I just have to say that, listening to you speak and, your connection with John, I'm sorry, it, 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 it shines through with John. You can tell your connection was so strong because you actually are his voice. I don't know if you're aware of that, but you inspire just like he did. You emit the passion and the courage of your convictions just like he did. So I just wanted to point that out and thank you for that. And you're a hero, period, for doing what you did to stand with him and fight the good fight. I always say. I know it's kind of corny, but so I have two quick questions, and one is, have you ever met Stella Assange?
No, I haven't met Stella. We had a brief conversation through DMs, but I haven't met her.
And my last question is just, we all know that the elites don't give up. They're relentless. They're diabolical. Do you still get? Do they still try to interact with you in any such way? For what I've always heard, it was called the kill switch that he definitely had in place. Do you get? I mean, are you followed still? Do people? Are they still trying to figure out where that is? And do they think that you know where that information could be found? I'm just curious. I mean, I'm hoping that you're not in any danger, but they're relentless. So I'm just curious.
Initially, after John first died, there was some pretty tense moments, because I do believe if they may have thought that I may have had access to it or knew how to get access to it. This kill switch, or this 31 terabytes of information that he said he had. Um, and then also maybe just because I was a loose end, and so maybe just trying to tie up loose ends. So there was for a while there, some pretty tense moments, but um, I'm safe. I'm safe. Um, and honestly, there's no safety in silence, and so that's why I've been trying to speak up and share what is happening, which is why I also want to share why there was a need to go and appeal to the courts, for the autopsy report. So during this process, when John first died, it was actually the prison that opened up an investigation into his death. So the prison did that the day after he died. And from the prison's report, it shows in their report that um, that John, they actually performed CPR on John while he still had the shoestrings tied around his neck. So I was able to see video of them. He brought him out into the hallway. So there was a camera right there in the hallway that was, facing his door. And so I was shown the video of them doing chest compressions. They put the bag over his mouth, and they were pumping air to him. But they were doing that while he still had the shoestring tied around his neck. And so when I saw that, to me, like
Jesus.
I don't profess to be a genius, but I do know that the first thing when you're performing CPR, the first thing you're supposed to do is to make sure the airway is clear. And I'm pretty sure bodies work the same in America as they do in Spain. So, you know, it just didn't make any sense to me.
Will you
know.
ever be able to get that video or?
Um, I don't know, but
Yeah.
in the prison's report, it's enough.
Yeah.
It's enough to
Oh,
prove
it
it, because
describes it. Didn't it?
the pictures, and because they have pictures in there, they also have pictures of people that were like still shots from the videos throughout the day when people were going and talking to John in front of, in front of his door, guards talking to him, but there was no statements from any of these people, no statement from the last person who would have seen him alive, which would have been his cellmate. So there's a lot of things that was missing from this report, but I was able to get this information, and so they took pictures of his body, and in those pictures he still had the shoestring tied around his neck. So even without the video, you know, it's understood what happened. Now, I'm not willing to go as far as saying that this was intentional, or whatever. You know, I'm not going to give my thoughts on that. You know what I'm saying? But what I will say is it just doesn't make any sense. Why would you perform CPR on someone in that way?
Yeah,
And so
with something tied
like
around their neck, it makes
what is
zero sense.
what is the you know doesn't make any sense. And so that's why I pushed for the autopsy report for theirs, because anything that I did after that wouldn't be conclusive. I mean, at least I don't know how these things work. Now, mind you, I'm making these decisions while I'm still grieving, which was difficult in and of itself, but it just seemed like the right thing to do, and so when I don't know if any of you are familiar with the news from the courts and their response, and they were saying, "Oh, we're not going to reopen the investigation." I didn't ask them to do any of that. I only asked my attorney, but I just wanted the autopsy report before they closed the case, because I wouldn't have an opportunity to come back once they closed it to ask for the autopsy report. And no, the autopsy report is not normally given. It's not standard practice to give it out. But when it is asked for, when it's requested, it's given. And so they haven't even given me a good enough reason as to why I can't have it, other than I don't need it. Well, that's not a reason, and that's certainly not a reason I was willing to accept, which is why the appeal came in. And so it was just funny to me reading the article of the court's response and why they were denying the appeal. They never addressed the autopsy, which was the only thing that I wanted. I didn't want them to reopen the investigation. I never even said that he was murdered. I've never gone that far to say that, because I don't know how he got in the position that he was in to be strung up in the first place. I don't know that. And I'm not going to speculate on that. I don't need to speculate on that because they performed CPR on him with shoestrings still tied around his neck. So whatever happened prior to that doesn't even matter. Like, why would you perform CPR on him in that way? That's the question that I want answered. And so, obviously, apparently, I'm not going to get an answer to that question, which is fine. But I think it's important for people to understand why I stayed here and why his body has been in the morgue, in a freezer somewhere, and why I was willing to extend this, because it just seemed like the right thing to do, to try to pressure them into releasing this information. Um, and no, I didn't succeed, but I think their denial is an answer, at least in my mind. So.
So John's body is still preserved. Then it's not to rest.
No, it's not. They just recently released custody of his remains. So we're in the process of gaining custody of his body, so he can he can be laid to rest.
All right. Thank you for that. Richard, if you want to go ahead. Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Janice,
thank
so
you.
much.
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So I just wanted to make a couple of comments, and plus I did have some questions. First of all, I grew up using the software, and I followed it my entire life. I'm 38 now, so it was when I was pretty young. And to start with, when I was following, everything he did, he was kind of like a hero. He kind of had the ensemblance of putting up the middle finger to the system. I really admired that, just personally. But to me, it seems like the the way his death was described was very suspicious, like you've been stating. And also, you mentioned that he was worried when you stated that he wanted to leave frantically, like on two separate occasions, and was worried about his life. And I don't think somebody, in my opinion, and from my point of view, that somebody who's worried about their life would commit suicide. Um, and after 2016, I imagine he had to have been on some type of watch list, because you mentioned that as well. I've looked up and I couldn't find anything on the FBI, CIA terror watch list or anything like that. And I'm asking because a regular person who posts something controversial on Twitter could be, monitored on those type of lists. Are you aware of any lists that he may have been on?
He probably was the list. Yeah. But seriously, no, I'm not aware of anything like that. I don't think the thing of these situations is that it was important that there was no paper trail of fuel, right? So there was no way to obviously in the moment of these things happening, we could document, we took pictures of people, even the people that were following me here in Spain, I have their pictures and all of that. But to a regular person looking at them, you're just going to see people. Like you're not going to understand the context of that. So the monitoring of him was designed in such a way to make him look crazy, right? To make people think that he was crazy, that he was just paranoid. But unless you were living it, and so I will never forget that initial, my introduction, if you will, into what he had been living with. Even in Belize, before his neighbor was killed, he was in hiding. Which I don't think a lot of people knew that, or he spoke about it, but he had been in hiding, since I believe that summer of 2012, because that's when they found out that he had given them these computers and that he had this information and he was collecting information on them. So he had been in hiding. They had been trying to find him, until again that culminated with his neighbor being murdered, which again he thought was a botched hit on him. So that was just the nature of the situation. So a lot of people around us just thought we both were crazy, right? That I was just as crazy as he was, because if you weren't in it, if you didn't understand what to look for, you just didn't understand. And a lot of times, like 95% of the time, nothing was happening. But that 5% of the time, we were ready and on guard, and so when majority of the time nothing is happening, of course people will start to believe that you're crazy and that you're paranoid and that you're just making all of this up. But then when something happens, he's the person that you want to be with, or he was the person that you would want to be with, because you knew you were safe with him. Just do what he said and you'd be safe. So I hope that answered your question.
Well, yeah. A couple of more real quick. Have you looked into this yourself, as in such as hiring maybe a private investigator, kind of maybe to kind of do some research, or you kind of stalled off?
Honestly, I'm just trying to get out of Spain now. I'm just trying to get his body and get out of Spain. And then what happens moving forward, I don't know. But this has been very taxing on me emotionally, and mentally, and I'm just done right now. If that's okay. Not that I need to ask permission, but it's been really really hard. Um, and I'm not sure that I have much more fight in me at this time, and I just want to get his body, and I just want him to go through that process and maybe do some proper grieving, without this sort of hanging over me. So moving forward, I'm sure that things will come from this, but at this moment, I just want people to know what happened, because up until this point, I wasn't sharing what I knew about the way they perform CPR on him, because the case was still open, and now that it's closed, I feel like I have the freedom to speak about it. So I want to keep doing that. But as far as anything else moving forward, I genuinely I don't have the finances. That's probably the biggest obstacle. I don't have the finances to do that. There's an opportunity to have an independent autopsy, but that's 30,000 euro, and they're probably way overcharging me just because they can. But I can't even afford that. So I can't even do that. So right now my focus is just getting his body and um, and getting out of Spain. You know.
Understood. And addressing the financial situation. Um, uh, so I was involved with well, not involved, but I was assisting a famous journalist, Lauren Conlon, with a suspicious death case, and of this lady's son, and they were able to raise the money with no finances, having to come from the mother, and also she's connected with Nancy Grace, and so they're investigating the situation right now. I even visited the scene of the incident and took pictures and videos, etc. I gave an analysis and that kind of thing. Maybe I don't want to make this all public or whatnot, but if I could pass this information on to them, maybe there's a way they could help you. And I bet they can get that video that you were describing and even analyze it. So you're a strong woman. It's an honor to even talk to you. Your husband was amazing. And thank you for having me.
No, thank you for your comments and for your support, and definitely, like I said, maybe moving forward, it's something I can address, but just right now, I think I just need a beat. I just really need a beat. 'Cause again, it's been a long, hard road. And intentionally so. I think they didn't want me here, asking questions and making things difficult, but that's what I do. So, but now I think I just need time to, like I said, just get his body and kind of figure out the next steps. Figure out what to do next. So, but thank you again for your comment.
Okay. Sam, if you want to go ahead.
Thank you so much for having me and everyone here. I mean, I think John did like maybe 4 or 5 other interviews after I did his interview with him. And Janice, you may not remember me. So many people contacted, but I was late. Like I flew in on a red eye the night before and then was late to the interview. And I was devastated because I had like no subscribers. You guys were super nice to me and I'm freaking out. And you're like, don't worry, Sam, like we'll reschedule. And like, not a problem. And like, you were so nice to me. And like, I remember crying that day because I was like, wow, like they're like the nicest 2 people I've ever met, And like, I used to watch John play the piano and like, he spoke to me, man. I came from an Irish Scottish background and he just spoke to me, and his love for you and how much he loved you and talked about you and you guys in unique, beautiful story and how it all developed. And it was like we were all watching a live sitcom. I mean, not a sitcom, a live like adventure movie. And honestly, I don't want to say sitcom, it's horrible miswording, but Janice, you're so strong. What you went through is it's still going through, and to hang that, them not to release the body and all that stuff. But I just want to let you know there's so many of us here for you. And there's definitely ways I can help you. Other people can help you. And I love you. We may have never met, but the way John loved us all, the way John was a pioneer, the way John pushed the music and the piano and poetry and life, like I still I still really struggle. I can only imagine how you are. So I'm sorry. I'm going to keep it together. But he was amazing and you're amazing and we're here for you and we love you. And you know what? The good shall inherit the earth, and it was like a bigger struggle versus good and evil in my mind. And he was telling us governments are going to take control. Like, how long are you going to sit here? And then, COVID happened and we saw what governments did to people. And we saw what went on. And look at Canada, the truckers and everything. It's like he was predicting all of it and telling us to be careful. And, he may not be here physically, but he lives in every single one of us. And I just want to say that. And I love you, Janice. And nice to hear you, Richard. And thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Sam, so much for your comments. And yeah, he was amazing. And, yeah, and he loved so passionately people, and he just wanted us to wake the fuck up, right? That's what he always said, just to wake up, and people would sometimes comment, well, and then what? Like, what's the plan? Like, what are you doing? Are you just, pointing out the problems? Then he gave this analogy, like if you're in a movie theater and there's a fire, you know, you're not going to form a committee to figure out, okay, so what should we do? No, you're just going to yell fire, and then everybody's going to move to the exit, and then we'll come up with a plan how to put the fire out. But first, you have to know that there's a fire. First, you have to know that you're in danger. first you have to know that there's a threat. And if you don't know that, well, then you can't even be a part of the plan to help wake others up, or to change the course of things that are happening. So um, it is difficult, and it will be difficult for the foreseeable future. He was just such a larger than life person, and but we have all of his videos and on all of these interviews that he did. And you weren't a little guy or nobody, as you said. He enjoyed speaking to people. That was his favorite part of giving these keynotes, was having Q&As afterward, meeting with people. And he would sit for hours afterward, with the scotch, and just talk about things, because he was just passionate about that, and he wanted to spark something in people. He wanted to genuinely leave the world in a better state than what it was in. And so, and he does definitely live through all of us. Definitely. So thank you so much, Sam, for your comments.
I think we got 2 more questions here, if that's cool with you, Janice.
Yes, that's cool.
All right. Chris, you go ahead first.
Thank you, and appreciate letting me come up here and ask some questions. And my condolences to you. Horrible thing to have happened, and the situation you're in. One of the things that I saw that was bothering me is somebody portraying themselves as the real McAfee. I think it was on social media, Twitter, and I found that they were connected to Ingersoll Lockwood website. Did you know anything about that?
No, I don't know anything about that, but I do know, if you're speaking about John's account, there it is being managed. So it's not, no one's impersonating him from his account, but are you speaking about something else?
It was after he was said he was dead, and somebody was posting as the real John McAfee, and it was saying stuff. So I wanted to make sure that was legitimate use of that. And what it looked like at the time is that it wasn't. And I was trying to find that out to make sure
Okay,
that.
so I know of, like I had mentioned earlier, that his Instagram, there's an official John McAfee Instagram that John didn't create. He didn't have control over that. He tried to get control over it when he was running for president in 2016, but the person wanted an amount of money that John wasn't willing to pay to gain control of it. So, so that is definitely an account that John doesn't have control over, as well as, or wouldn't have had control over, and as well as the Telegram. John wasn't on Telegram either. So if that's either of the social medias that you're
Yep.
talking about, those are not
Yes,
legitimate.
ma'am. Thank
Okay.
you so much. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Okay, Rice TV. Go ahead, man. Take it home.
All right. I appreciate. It's not really a question. I just wanted to come on and say hello to Janice. I've interviewed Janice. I did her first public interview. What's that, Janice?
I said, hey.
It's good. It's good hearing your voice, and shout out to the guys for like hosting the spaces. Um, I interviewed John 7 times. I've done 3 interviews with Janice. I did her first public interview after John's death. I encourage people to check out my channel, check out my playlist section. There's a specific video that I really want to encourage people to watch when some people are asking about what we can do to keep the legacy of the man, the myth, the legend, John McAfee alive. There's a speech that he had recorded for some anarchists back in late 2019 for an event that I was attending in Philadelphia called Anarchadelphia. It's a fork from Anarchapulco, and it's called Open Your Cage. And it's about 10 minutes long, but it's some of the wisest stuff that John has shared. It was him kind of relaying a message to a bunch of anarchists who are pro crypto, which is right up John's alley. So I really encourage people to check those out. And then Janice, I guess I did have a question. Is it possible that you can post up from your Twitter account some cryptocurrency addresses, whether it's Ethereum for ERC20s or in Ethereum or Bitcoin or whatever, so that people can contribute to the possibility of getting an independent autopsy done regardless of the price? And because I've seen a lot of people donate to a lot of idiotic things, and I think this would be for a very, very good cause. So is there a way that you can post some cryptocurrency addresses from your account so that people who are listening can help out and donate to the cause?
Um, well, yeah, of course, I could do that. It's, you
Well,
know,
will you do it?
will I do? Will I do it? Well, I guess I don't see why not, because I would, want the opportunity to be able to do the autopsy. But it's just, this is just strange for me, being in a position of needing, needing financial assistance. So yeah, I can do that if people would be willing to give. That would be amazing. If not, that's fine too.
Well, I suggested because, and the reason I mean, I spent a lot of time talking to Janice, and she's been in Spain this entire time, and it's not been an inexpensive experience. So whatever funds that Janice had prior to John's arrest and ultimately his death, I'm sure are running low. So anything that we can do to help out, I mean, considering the contributions that John has offered to the cryptocurrency community, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people listening here are crypto enthusiasts. Shout out to Sam, Crypto Lifer, good friend of mine. I saw Satoshi Sean in the chat earlier, who's had you and John on as well. Crypto people appreciate John. We appreciate what John stood for. And regardless of the price, I think we need to know the true answers to this. And me knowing a little bit more of the situation beyond what you've explained already, we definitely need to have answers. I don't know about anybody else listening to this, but I have never heard of a situation where somebody's body has been held up for more than 2 years, which to me is a human rights violation, regardless of what anybody thinks about an individual or not. I think the family and Janice deserve closure, and anything that we can do to help expedite getting the truth out there and getting you back into the States so that we can continue keeping the legacy of John alive would be greatly appreciated. So yeah, if you could post some cryptocurrency addresses so that people can donate to the cause, because John has a lot of he was a very influential person who I think meant a lot to people, and I think it shows with all people that are here joining us. So I'll be quiet and just leave my piece. But thank you to the hosts.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for your comments and everything. Yeah, it's definitely, it's been strange, because the courts really didn't need to keep his body, so there's really no explanation of that. And we, petitioned the courts um more than once to have his remains released, while this appeal process was happening, because there was just no need. And had they have released his remains, I would have been back, in America a long time ago. But for whatever reason, because this case was still open, they were not releasing the custody of his remains. So, um, but I'm glad to finally be at this stage where that can now happen, and we can move forward. So again, thank you, Chris, so much for your comments, and for just being someone that John could speak to, and he really enjoyed the interviews. I think if anyone has the time, you should go and check them out, because they're, candid interviews. And definitely check out that speech that John gave. He always was just full of wisdom, and always tried to share that with everyone. So thank you, Chris.
Thank you. I love you, Janice. You have a good one. Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Thank you. You too.
All right, thank you very much. I think that's. I mean, there's one more person requesting a question. It's up to you, Janice.
Sorry. Sure, I can do one more.
Okay, last one. All right. the BTC. You could go ahead and speak.
Hey, how y'all doing tonight?
Good, good.
Hey,
Good, thank you.
I'm just wondering, after, I get like the whole John thing and like everything that he's gone through and all that, but like, the big thing that really has been a concern of mine is like, I remember back in like 2018 and stuff, and he did like the coin of the week and like all the scams and things he promoted and
I don't think we have anyone else that is looking for a question.
Okay.
So yeah, Janice, thank you so much for joining us tonight and having the courage to come do this,
Yeah.
and rehashing all those memories. I know that wasn't easy. I could tell. Obviously, it was a pretty emotional couple hours. Just thank you so much for doing that, because I think it gave a lot of people closure and more of, well, like Rice said too, we do want answers on what exactly happened to John that day. But we do have a lot more answers now that we were able to hear you talk, and we appreciate that from the bottom of our hearts.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and allowing me to share a little bit of our story. So, yeah, thank you. And thank you to everyone that tuned in and for your questions and comments and your support. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Again, Janice, we'll have to keep in touch. If you ever want to do this again, we definitely will. Keep us updated. Hopefully, we get you back to the States soon with John's body, put him to rest, and everyone can move on. But I just want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. Janice, do you want to leave us with any words?
Yeah, I'll just leave you with something that John would always end his interviews with, and that was do what you love. Do what you love, and do only what you love, because otherwise you're just wasting time, you know. So yeah.
All right. God bless you guys. I love you guys. Good night. Janice, love you.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Thank you.